here we are. It's 10 o'clock or a little after. And we are here today to talk about poetry out loud with Alston and Joshua Brown from the Nebraska Arts Council and Jennifer Norton, our own Jennifer Norton from Lexington. Well, she's not really from Lexington, but she's the library director in Lexington. And um, because Jennifer has participated in the Poetry Out Loud program. So any questions, she can help us work through those. You can unmute yourself and ask, or I will see it in the chat if you type it in there. So I'm going to turn it over to Anne and Joshua so we can get going this morning.
Well, thank you so much for having us join you, Denise. Very briefly, Josh and I should introduce ourselves too. So I'm a program specialist with Nebraska Arts Council, been here for a very long time. And Poetry Out Loud is a program that our agency has run for a very long time. Then the upcoming school year, the 24-25 school year will be the 20th year, which is a big deal for POL. And it's part of a national program. And we'll get into that in a minute. But Josh, do you want to say a few words too?
Yeah, I am a program coordinator here at the Arts Council, so I do a lot of communication with the coordinators and teachers who make Poetry Out Loud happen. So a lot of, if you pick up the phone, it's going to be me a lot of the time. Same with grants too. I do a lot of grants for our agency, school bus, creative aging, all that kind of wonderful education stuff. That is me and that is us.
All right. Yes. And we work really closely together a lot. So if you don't get one of us, you'll get the other. And it's a small agency, so you're always welcome to contact either of us. So go ahead to the next slide, Josh. I want to just provide a little bit of a broad overview of what POL is. Jennifer, this photo may look familiar because this was your student from Lexington who participated in the state finals at POL, Anna Potter, I believe her last name is. At any rate, so Poetry Out Loud, as I said, is going into its 20th year. And first off, I want to make it clear, it's a poetry recitation program. It is not slam poetry. And even though sometimes there are some ancillary components where students can write their own poetry, it's really about introducing students to the great works, published poetry. And so we like to talk about why participate. The other thing is, historically, we've worked with schools. Jennifer Norton gets kudos for being the very first librarian to run a program in her library. So it's really great to see libraries becoming engaged. POL helps introduce students to great poetry. There is a huge anthology of poetry that they can select from. It includes classic poetry that goes back into the ages, as well as contemporary poetry. The program is designed to increase literacy and reading for young people. This is strictly for high school students, by the way. You can always have some middle school students tag along, but the official program is for high school students. Students explore their literary heritage. I will mention that the anthology of poetry has the people who organize it at the National Endowment for the Arts and the Poetry Foundation have worked very hard to include a very diverse selection of poetry. You see a lot of women poets represented, and people from very diverse backgrounds on many levels are represented in this poetry. The other thing that we have discovered is that the students may be reciting poetry, but they learn a bit about public speaking and how to conduct themselves with poise in public settings. You can go to the next slide, Josh. Josh, are we freezing?
Looks like Josh might be frozen.
I think he
Let's
might be
see. I know.
frozen. Yeah. Uh-oh. Well, I'll talk about the next slide. Anyway, I'll just keep going here a little bit. I don't know what happened. Josh's office is right next to mine, so maybe I'm using up all the bandwidth here. So the next thing I want to talk about a little bit is, what do sponsor organizations get by participating in Poetry Out Loud? Well, there's a teacher's guide that is available to teachers or the librarians running the program. There is a Poetry Out Loud website, which we'll show you shortly, which includes an anthology of well over 1,000 poems. It might be over 1,200 now. Changes a little bit from year to year. The Poetry Foundation, which is based in Chicago, manages that, and sometimes there are issues with the more contemporary poetry. They have to get public permission, copyright permission, and so forth from various poets and publishers. We offer a lot. We're on the next slide, Josh, if you're able to change it. We offer a lot of individualized assistance throughout the program. Josh, in particular, is great about helping librarians or teachers along as they get started. We also work with several poets and performing artists who are very, very well versed in, no pun intended, in Poetry Out Loud, and who will work closely with organizations that are participating. In the past year, we had all virtual online visits by our poets and performing artists, but in the coming school year, we're looking at opportunities to send artists out to visit in person, to meet with students and sponsors in schools or libraries that are running their programs. And so we don't have all of the details ironed out for that, but hopefully there'll be some opportunities if somebody wants to run a program and wants to have one of our artists come in, they'll be able to do that. It's all free, by the way. There's no charge for any of this. And finally, we like to tell teachers and librarians that you have a lot of choice. There are certain things that you do have to adhere to with our timeline and deadlines, but the program ranges from small programs where someone runs a program with just a handful of students to large programs. We have some schools where it's a required for all the students, or at least required for all the 10th graders, that kind of thing. And it's really up to you. And as librarians who are, outside the school, that gives you some flexibility too. There is one fundamental requirement, because now and then we will hear from someone. Often I'll get an email sometime in the year from a student saying, hey, I'm in, I want to participate. The sponsor has to have at least a couple of students, preferably more than a couple, but at least a couple of students to compete at the library or school level first. You can't just have one student who says I'm in. That would be unfair to other schools and entities that run programs and hold competitions to select which ones go to our qualifier round. So you do need to get at least a small group together and make this work. You can go to the next slide, Josh. It's like back in action. Okay, Jennifer, thanks for taking the time the other day to talk about your experience this year, and chime in if you want to add anything. But Joshua and I were also talking about how this is an opportunity for libraries, slightly different than schools. It may allow you to develop partnerships with local schools or homeschool groups. It may help you in your efforts to expand engagement in the community through your own youth programming. You might also bring in adults as volunteers who might help you with your program, or maybe would be willing to serve as a judge for your local competition. Just some opportunities there. And if you have existing programs for young people, this might be a way to enhance the existing programs, and it might be a way to do some work together with other adult programs. For instance, if you wanted to have your students who were involved in POL maybe do a little informal set of recitations, like practice set of recitations for groups like your book club members, if you have a book club of adults. There's some, interesting possibilities for cross-pollination, I think. And it's, anyway, I those aren't all the things, but that's what I came up with. Anything you want to add, Jennifer?
I guess I would just add that the way I introduced Poetry Out Loud to Lexington was I had already started a teen book club that met at the high school. So I introduced it through that. And then the students who were interested, I think there were probably some more, but their schedules just prohibited them from doing one more thing. So that's how I introduced the program. And thank you for the opportunity and opening it up to libraries. It's a program I've always admired and wanted to participate in.
Well, thank you for doing this, because the other piece of this is that, and we talked about this the other day, schools are dealing with some challenges these days with a shortage of teachers who are pretty overwhelmed. This might be a way to work with teachers, but take some of the load off for them by partnering with them, by running the program, but somehow involving them too. I'm not sure how it might look, but I think there's some real opportunity here to build those relationships with the schools and the teachers. Josh, you can go to the next slide, please. So, a few things about running your program, how your programming might look, which is just a little different if you're doing it in your library. And if it's in a school, it might be part of a class every day, like a segment of a class every day. Chances are you might do this more like once or twice a week with a school. I'm not sure. There, again, you have flexibility. But the program, and this, you can help sell this to teachers, it's aligned with our English language arts standards as well as the fine arts theater standards. So it helps address those things that are required of students in schools. You could do the weekly sessions. Chances are you would need to plan out a month or longer to give the students time to select the poems, practice their recitations, because they basically have to memorize. They have to choose what they want, get familiar with it, and select two. Well, at the school level, at the library level, you might just do one poem that they memorize and recite and compete with one another about. But then the student who wins, who goes on to the qualifier that's held in late January to early February, they have to have 2 poems memorized. So it is somewhat rigorous for students in that regard. There's a wide window of time to carry out your program from the beginning of the school year through most of January, by which time you'll need to have your student, you will have to hold a competition with your students, identify the champ, and then have them memorize 2 poems and record them for an online virtual qualifier round. By the way, one of the things we hear, because the speech and debate program is a big statewide program that many, many schools participate in. And in an effort to try not to interfere with speech and debate activities, which are often held on Saturdays, frankly, we'll hold our next qualifier competition. This is when you send your library's winning student, you have them prepare recorded recitations. That will be online again, as we did this year. And then for the students who go on to state finals, Next year, it will be on a Sunday. This year, for various reasons, we had to have it on a Saturday. We know that there were conflicts for some students who were involved in some state sports activities as well as speech activities. So next year might be a different location, might not be at Sheldon, depends. We haven't got that figured out, but we're going to do it on a Sunday afternoon because official public school activities are not held on Sunday afternoons. So it will avoid that conflict. Okay, you can go to the next slide, Josh. What's the appeal for students? There are some amazing prizes in this program for students. In a state like ours, where our program is relatively small, this year was a very small program. Some years we might have 20 or 30 schools participate. We don't know what this coming year will look like. I'd love to have at least 20, but I don't know. It's still relatively small, so the chance of winning a significant prize is huge. The top student at state finals gets a cash award, and their school or library also gets a $500 stipend toward the purchase of of poetry materials. And the runner-up also gets a stipend, and their school or library gets a stipend, I think $200 toward the purchase of poetry materials. The kids build confidence. Frankly, they engage with one another in a really positive way. And the best thing of all in my mind is that often students who didn't think they liked poetry start loving it and start relating to it and start connecting with it in a big way. So my favorites in the past have been those kids who came in, the football player who ended up winning the national championship one year. Or in our state, one year we actually had a student from, this is years ago, in Ewing, who, and back in the day, that he had to choose whether to be in the boys' state basketball tournament or Poetry Out Loud. And he chose Poetry Out Loud. And he won the state championship and got to go to Washington and compete for more prizes and bring his parents along to Washington. So in the end, that was a lot of fun, but that was long ago. Okay, next slide. I think we're almost there with the slides. Overall, there are over $50,000 in prizes and scholarships awarded. Our state has had we've never had a national champion, but we've had national finalists who've won several $1,000s, and not to mention the trip to DC. And the picture you see is the prizes that went to the top 3 students this year. We get hand-blown glass awards on these little wood bases that each of the students gets. And we also always try to make sure they get other little prizes. Sometimes it's poetry books. I forget, what did we give out this year? I think we had poetry books for the other 3 students at state finals this year. So we try to make it worth their while. We try to make it worth your while. I think that we're just about there. What's the next slide, Josh? I think we're on to you and your link to some things that you're going to walk everybody through. So I'm going to turn it over to Josh because he'll walk you through some of the online resources and what it looks like to sign up and so forth. So you can take it away, Josh.
All right. You should now be seeing the Poetry Out Loud registration page, which is on our website. That's the Nebraska Arts Council. So I'm gonna back out so that if you go to the Nebraska Arts Council site, you know how to get to where I am now. So this is what we're looking for, the registration area. And there's nothing that says Poetry Out Loud on this front page, so you have to know to click on Discover Arts Education, and that's going to take you to where you want to be. Poetry Out Loud is the 3rd link down, and then you'll be here at our registration page. And this is kind of your one-stop shop for everything Nebraska Poetry Out Loud. The next site that we'll look at is the national page. This is just for us in Nebraska. You've got your registration form here. You can put everything in right there. You don't have to go anywhere else. You submit right there on the site, and that will send a form to us. Then you're on the list. From there, we've got a little bit of information, some more about the DC trip and prizes. Very important here is the calendar. This will be refreshed in September. This is last year's calendar, but this is a really good thing to look at if you're considering a program, because it's going to give you a roadmap and some pins in your map, as it were. So definitely take a look at that. It tells you when state qualifier videos are due, and when state finals are coming up. Otherwise, you've got a few different resources here. Again, if you're thinking about pursuing a program, check out the video with Matt Mason, who's our state poet. He's a real charmer, and he does a really good job with this video. He's just fun to be around, and he's almost always a big part of our program here in Nebraska. So that's another thing to look forward to, is hanging out with Matt Mason. He's been our MC at the finals for many years, does a great job. He's also one of our teaching artists for the program. There's also a great little clip that we made a couple years ago about how to record these videos for the qualifiers. That's a must watch if you're gonna do this, because it's gonna tell you just how to use a cell phone to make your qualifier videos. Check out the rest of these links here. They're all really terrific. Some are a little bit more oriented towards school-based programs, but there's no harm in knowing that stuff. Next, we're going to switch gears and take a look at the National Poetry Out Loud page. So if you were to Google Poetry Out Loud, this is what comes up. You all can see that here. Let me see. Great. Terrific. This is a nice place to send students who are interested, maybe on the fence. There's a lot of wonderful clips of our former winners. This is last year's winner here. There's also the poetry anthology, which is the main thing that students will need to know about on this website. There they can browse through all of the wonderful poems that we have in the anthology. You can see it just starts off with the first one in order. You can browse through, but there are some filters here. Each student is going to need one poem that's 25 lines or fewer, and one that is pre-20th century. This tool makes it really easy to know which poems qualify. It's important to look to and not just assume that a poem is available. Check here. There's about 1,000 poems in here, so a lot of the classics are in here, but not everything, and it does change from year to year. So especially if you get into that second year, you got to make sure and see what poems are available this year. There's even a random poem button, which I think is kind of fun. Just push the button and it shuffles, and that's another thing students can do to find new interesting work. There's more information here about what it's like to compete. Lots of good videos here. This is more for libraries that might be considering a program. Also here, if you do pursue a program at your library, this area, the teachers and organizers section, is going to be very, very useful to you, because it has some of these resources here that you can share in your community, but also just everything else you need to know. The lesson plans there that you can share with teachers or even try to run yourself. There's Anne. Information about organizing contests, and everything you need to know. The handbook is here. It's a little lengthy, but the font is big, and it has a lot of that information that you need to know as a first-year person. Otherwise, we've got some kind of nuts and bolts stuff down in the about section, the rules and eligibility. This little POL student promo video is really nice. It's a few minutes long, so I'm not gonna bother you all with it here, but they did a nice job of producing it and using kind of elevated language to get kids interested in this program. There is a lot to unpack here, and we don't have a ton of time, but it's kind of fun, and you get a real sense for the program if you visit this site. The national finals are incredible. It's really the students that participate, like Anne said, they get a lot out of that, and they are then a part of a national group, which is an amazing, really, $20,000 is the top prize for the nationals. That's pretty cool. But the relationships that kids make, even if they don't win at that national competition, are life-changing. So really an amazing goal here, a really wonderful program. That's about what I have on our websites.
Denise, how are we doing on time? Do we have time to talk just a little more, take questions and answers, or?
We have till about 11 o'clock, so we're about halfway through the hour. So if you have more we want you to share as much as you want to share.
Well,
And,
I will add a couple.
and leave some time for questions.
Oh yeah, we have plenty of time. Those are all the slides, and I think Josh has pretty much covered the main things to walk through. I want to add a few things. One is that the national competition is coming up May 1st and 2nd. And the student who won this year is a girl from Marion High School in Omaha. And one of the the semifinals, it's not really great for kids in school because the semifinal competition, how do I say this? Okay, at the nationals, they have 3 subsets. Basically, all the kids from the eastern states have a semifinal in the morning, and then another 16 or 17 students from the middle states in the central and mountain time zone have a semifinal in the afternoon. That's when we're involved. And then the students from the western states in the Pacific time zones have a late afternoon semifinal. Well, our student, and we can send a link if anybody has the time to tune in. Our student is reciting one of her 2 poems that she'll recite in the semifinal is actually a poem by our former state poet, Twyla Hansen. It's about the Perseid meteor shower. I can't recall the exact, the name of the poem is very long, but it'll be really fun to see her recite a poem by Twyla. And I let Twyla know that she's doing it, so I hope Twyla herself can join in and hear her poem recited. This anthology includes poems by a number of Nebraska artists. If you scroll through, you'll find poems by Ted Kuzer, Matt Mason, Twyla Hansen, Kwame Dawes, who is a professor at UNL. I can't remember. Seems like there was somebody else, but I can't recall who. So anyway, it's fun you can discover a lot. Even adults who are interested in poetry can discover a lot of great poetry here. So I wanted to mention that. The other thing is that over the years, we don't separate the big schools from the little schools from the libraries. Everybody competes together. And frankly, over the years, we've had some state champs from tiny little schools, such as Ewing or Thayer Central Community School down in Hebron. It's just varied over the years. There's a little private school. I don't think they're participating anymore. Their teacher retired, but Parkview Christian School in Lincoln had state champs a couple of times. Tiny little school. Often it's just a matter of a teacher or librarian who loves poetry, who can kind of ignite that in students they're working with, and then the students get to work, and it's fun to see who ends up participating. So Josh or Jennifer, if either of you have other things to share or offer.
Maybe just going back to what Josh said about some of the criteria for the poems. He mentioned the pre-20th century and the 25 lines or fewer. I know my students liked that one poem could justify or hold both criteria. So one poem can satisfy, that's my word, both criteria.
Absolutely. The way it generally works is that the organization that's sponsoring the program will have a competition with the students. And if it's a big school, they might have several classroom competitions to start. But let's say you have a competition and you've got a group of students. You can either have them all recite one poem, or you can have them recite 2 poems. Often it's just one poem at that level. And then the student who wins that competition is going, only one student goes on to the next qualifier round, which is what I mentioned earlier, is online. And for that round, they do have to memorize 2 poems. And then if they advance on to state finals, which will be held in March again, I don't have the exact date yet though, they have to have 3 poems. And that's the point where we try to make sure that our state finals event mirrors the national event. And that's where they have to definitely have at least 1 pre-20th century and 1 short poem. And I can tell you historically, the reason for that, this program has changed and evolved a bit over the years. Early on, it became apparent, that students gravitated to contemporary or 20th century poetry. And so those who run the program at the national level said, wait a minute, they're missing out on a lot of old traditional poetry, classic works. So they decided they would require 1 pre-20th century poem. The other thing they discovered was this, that a lot of the really, really competitive students who were doing work at a very high level were gravitating to the very long, involved, complicated poems because it helped show their expertise in their recitation. And so therefore, the short but wonderful poems were being overlooked by the most competitive students. And so they added a requirement saying, okay, at least one of your poems has to be short. See what you can do with it. Yeah, so that's how that came about over the years. Trying to think of other important elements to this program that I can share. Right now, the registration for next year is already opened, as Josh showed you. So you could register today if you want. You're welcome to. Typically, a lot of the schools don't register until August or September. I wouldn't wait much past September. I think the deadline to register is, we got to look at it, Josh, October 1st or October 15th, but I recommend registering earlier and getting started earlier because it can take a little while to get your program up and running and getting the students you need to make the program work. And I just want to stress that we're there to help you along the way. That first year can be a little tricky to figure out how it all works. I know that. And Joshua and I are available to assist. And then once we line up a teaching artist to help you there, they're also available to assist development of your program and work with your students. One of the things that teachers have told me that is a really good way to get students motivated is to look at videos of other students performing. You can do a Google search and find dozens and dozens of poetry out loud recitations done by students. Kids respond to other kids and show them a few of the recitations, and that might really get them going. And talking about the prizes, because honestly, there are some really, really nice prizes available. We offer travel stipends if you need one to get to the state finals. We've always held the state finals in Lincoln. I'm not 100% sure about next year. We're really rethinking where it's going to be because I don't think Sheldon Art Museum, where we've held it for many years, will be available on a Sunday. That's why we wound up with a Saturday this year. It was just a change since the pandemic. And so it might be a new location, but we'll make travel stipends available to ensure that students from pretty far away can still get to state finals. Maybe we should just open it up. Does anyone have questions that we can address for you?
Yeah, feel free, if you want to type something in the chat, we'll read it out, or if you want to unmute yourself and just ask your question, that's great too.
This is Gail from Ainsworth. I just wanted to say that poetry is a great form of storytelling. And out here where we live, we have a lot of cowboy poets, and they portray storytelling so well. But I wanted to also say that Matt Mason is a wonderful person to get the students excited about poetry. I never really liked poetry all that much until we had him here at the library doing a presentation. And I tell you, he just drew everybody in, and they all says, I'm going to have to rethink this poetry thing. So I'm so glad you have him involved.
We are too. We're thrilled. Matt has been involved from, I think, the very first year that we started it, the first or second year. He's been involved for many years, has done a lot of work with it, and he is great. He gets students who might otherwise not be excited about poetry, excited about poetry. He knows how to turn them on to it. So I appreciate those comments.
Again, just the logistics of it, they can sign up anytime now through September to be a site, and then you gathered. I know there's no exact minimum, but because I know I've got some smaller towns on, I was writing down, because everybody who's here, all of my librarians who are here, will earn a CE of credit for learning about this today. But so is it, do you try, I know you try and get as many as you can, but let's say you have 3 to 5 who consistently come. Can that be a program?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yep, we really try to make it as flexible as we can. We draw the line at 1. And that has happened. Unfortunately, it happened about a year ago and I felt terrible because it was a school that had participated for a number of years. And they had started with a few kids, and then others dropped out, and they said, we only have 1 student who wants to do this. And I said, if you can just find someone to compete with that student, but that's where we draw the line. We need a minimum competition. But
So then you have
more than 2.
a competition.
Ideally, you'll have 3 to 5 to 10 to 20. And so that's why we try to include some things that, for instance, if you're working with a local school or a homeschool group or any group of young people, that you can kind of encourage them by telling them about some of these opportunities and make it less threatening to them, and open them up to it. So.
Well, and that's where the videos come in, I think, where they can see other students. But so then you stage a competition, you have a competition, and you choose just one person from your school to go to this, or from your library to go to the state level. Okay.
Yeah, one is
I just
chosen.
wanted to make sure it's not age divided. It's not.
It's grades
Okay.
9 through 12. The only students who can officially compete must be in grades 9 through 12. And
Okay.
I always try to encourage schools, teachers, librarians to have their first runner-up stay in the game a little bit. Because if that student who wins the competition becomes ill or has conflict or something happens, we'll let the runner-up take their place up to a pretty late point in the game. So I think I would encourage you to, if you have a small competition, to also name your runner-up and make a big deal over that runner-up, because they could very well wind up representing your library.
That just happened this
Okay.
year with one of our private schools in Omaha. They had a 2nd-year student who probably had a pretty good chance of winning everything. But then at the last minute had a conflict with I think it was speech. She just didn't see the calendar, and neither did mom, neither did the coach, and it all kind of came to a head about a week before the state competition. And that was a real drag. She would have done well. And then they didn't have their alternate ready to go. That was the real drag, is that the school invested a lot, but did not get a chance to deliver.
Yeah.
I just want to jump in there. I only had 2 students participating, and they happen to be twin sisters who are both freshmen. So there was a lot of competition between the 2 girls. They compete in everything and they're very competitive. So the one who actually did end up being our state qualifier, her sister was a little miffed about that whole thing. But I took both girls to the state finals, and they gained a lot of experience. And the fact that they're both freshmen, hoping that they'll continue next year, and hopefully gather some more students, because it would be, I think, a better program if you have more kids. Doing it myself, a large group of 20 may not be feasible, but a half a dozen to 10 would certainly be wonderful. We met after school, oftentimes in the evenings, 6 or 6:30. So I stayed late to accommodate their schedules. So you have to be committed to that. And I give kudos to the students, because they too were committed. They had after school program or activities, sports, what have you. One had a job and she'd come after work at 6 or 6:30. And then our teaching artist here in Lexington was Pippa White, and she's fabulous. And we met several times via Zoom, and she helped the girls along. So it's doable, and I thoroughly enjoyed it and was excited to continue and do it next year as well.
And that was a
Jennifer,
wonderful
you
article
mentioned,
that your newspaper printed about your program too.
Well, I kind of wrote that article and submitted it. They needed to know. So
That's
but
great.
how else are they going to know about it if I don't get it out there? So yeah, that was kind of my doing, and submitted the pictures. And thankfully our newspaper is we have like one full-time reporter, so he can't be everywhere all the time. So I submitted that article, and it was wonderful that they included that. So hopefully that press coverage reaches more people, and even some parents and grandparents to say, hey, did you guys know this was going on? So yeah. Denise, you started to say something.
I had a question for you, Jennifer. You mentioned that you had Pippa White as your teaching artist. Is that someone that you tracked down, or how do you get a teaching artist?
Anne and Joshua make that assignment. Yeah. And I think, Matt Mason certainly would have done it, but I think he was also otherwise committed to a lot of his state poet obligations, and he may have been the teaching artist for some other schools. I'm not sure, but Pippa was wonderful.
Yeah, every year we have 3 or 4 different teaching artists. Like Pippa's background is primarily in theater. She's formally trained as an actor and singer, but she also knows a great deal about poetry, recitation. These are all artists who know the POL program inside out, and they're highly qualified. So we've got Pippa, Matt, another woman named Petra Valquist. It varies a little bit year to year, but they're all people that we know and have worked with and who are professionals in their own right, know all about POL.
That's terrific. And so then you don't feel like you're all alone trying to figure out you don't have to know how to coach into recitation, because you have someone who knows all about it, who can speak directly to them. So that's great support, because I'm trying to think about, our librarians are doing a lot of things. They got a lot of balls in the air. So it's great to have the support of someone who's really terrific at this.
I'm really curious just about where everybody is from in this meeting. So Gail, you're from Ainsworth, and I see somebody is from Valentine. Maybe
we have someone Cozad. We have someone from Sutherland, which is just west of North Platte. Holdridge. Let's see, Red Cloud. And Amanda, you're from Franklin, so clear south of Minden.
okay.
There,
Oh
so
wow, that's quite a spread. That's
I do have a
fantastic.
it's a
question.
huge spread.
I did have a question on the competition. So the first is for us to have a local competition. And then you had mentioned that they had to then do 2 poems on video. Is that to get to the state competition?
Yeah, it's basically like a semifinal round. So yeah, so if you were running a program, you would have your own competition, probably live and in person, although if you wanted to do it virtually with recordings, you could, but you'd probably do it live with students, performing together. And then you would select your winner and runner up. And then the winner would then have a window of time to make sure they memorize a second poem and then you do their own recording. We're not looking for high quality, fancy recording operations. I mean, we always tell and we have that little video that Josh mentioned about recording tips and tricks. I would encourage, it's a 5-minute video. I would encourage everybody to look at that, but you can do it on your phone. Ideally, the student who was recording recitations would have a second person recording them. I've seen students try to do it themselves, which is a little awkward. It's good to have a second person doing it. You can do it on your phone. Just do it horizontal format. And you actually, if you do a recording and you're not happy with it, you can redo it in the recorded video. And then you submit your 2 recordings. And we have judges who look at all of the recordings, and there's a whole set of criteria for what judges look for. Josh, would you want to pull up something on the website about the criteria of exactly what the judges look for? Like when you do your own school level competition, or sorry, library level competition, you would have judges look at these criteria. They have score sheets. It's very specific. And we have a whole judge's guide. One of the big things that is required is accuracy. You get dinged big time if you're not accurate in your recitation. But it's also about how, let's see, if you go up to evaluation criteria, I think I just saw it. There's a 1-page. Where's that 1-pager? I'm thinking it might be further down. There we go. That there's more detailed information available, but physical presence. How does the student carry himself or herself? Their voice, and are they articulating the poetry well? Are they interpreting the poem like they understand it? That's really important. Well, interpretation and evidence of understanding are similar. And then overall, sometimes there's this overall sense of whether the student just did a fantastic performance or maybe could use some work. So the judges score on these criteria. So it's broken out that way. And then there's a separate judge who just checks accuracy. They have a printed copy of the poem that they are reading while the student is reciting to make sure it's accurate. This is memorization. This is what our grandparents did. And then it went out of favor for a long time, and then it came back with poetry out loud. So yeah, those are some of the considerations.
And then my question, Terry's question jogged another question in me is, okay, so not every participating institution gets to send someone to state, because they send their videos in, they get judged on the videos, then only select few. Is there a number, or does each institution?
It depends on how many participants we have. If we have 25 schools and libraries participating, they will not all go to state finals. we'll have to, and I'm not sure where we'll cut it down. We'll probably cut it down to about a dozen or 15. But this year we had such a small program and we had a number of schools drop out really late in the game. We were down to 6 contestants. So we said, okay, everybody goes to state. So it really depends on the number. I would say I'm really hoping we will have more than 6. We were very disappointed this year. We just had an array of strange things that happened, that schools dropped out, schools that had done it for years couldn't continue. So it's going to depend on the number. I would say there's a good chance they'll get to go into state, but no, it's not guaranteed. And it's
Okay.
gonna.
I just didn't know if each institution that was able to send someone.
Yeah, every school that participates will definitely, and again, I keep saying school because that's what we've done for so long, school or library, will definitely get to participate in the qualifier online round. It will just depend on how many we have.
Part of that qualifier round too is we post the videos on a private web page for other students, so they can kind of see everybody who's out there and kind of understand the field a little bit better. That can be a really helpful tool to know where you are in the competition and elevate before state finals.
Okay, well, we're just rolling up on 11 o'clock now. Does anybody else have any questions for either Ann or Joshua or Jennifer? Jennifer's our experienced librarian here. All righty. Well, like I say, I will edit this recording a bit, cut off the beginning so you don't have to sit through us figuring stuff out. And then I'll post the recording and the PowerPoint slides together. And that will be out tomorrow, because I'll have to, like I say, I'll have to record it. So we're getting some thanks about how interesting it was and the information provided. And I thank you for coming today to do that with us, because I'm not familiar with this at all. So I thought, man, this sounds really great. And now that you've opened up to libraries, we wanted to get some more people involved.
Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate everyone who joined today. Jennifer, I'm particularly glad you joined us and could lend your personal insights into how your program went. And yeah, feel free to contact us if you have, and if you think of questions later about getting started or anything else. So thank you.
I just
All right, and I'll put your contact out. Sorry, Josh.
Oh, no problem. I just wanted to say how thrilled we were to have Jennifer and the Lexington Public Library participate this year. It was a surprise and a treat, and we're really, really excited to have more interest from libraries. I think this is a terrific direction for the program to go, and it's a great way to get poetry back in libraries. I know when I was growing up, I was at the library several times a week. The chess club was there. I was homeschooled too, so I had lots of time to read. But I didn't pick up very many poetry books, and this would be a good way to get kids engaged on an art form that later meant a lot to me, a little bit earlier.
And one last thing, our agency newsletter just went out yesterday. It includes an article about POL Nationals, which will be live streamed. You can tune into the national competition. I'll forward that newsletter to you, Denise, if you'd be willing to forward it to everybody who joined us today, just in case you're interested in watching the national competition.
Sure. Yep, I'll send it out. I have my list of people for the continuing education credits, and so I'll send it out to them. Alrighty. Well, thank you so much. We'll see all of you again.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you. Bye-bye.